Welcome, everyone. Today, I'm very excited to speak with Captain Pete Bethune from New Zealand. He has quite a history of accomplishments, starting with establishing a world record for powerboats circling the globe, but running on 100% biodiesel, and his well-known efforts piloting the Oddie Gill as part of the Sea Shepherd effort to save whales are just the beginning. His passion to make a difference has continued to lead him to focus on saving wildlife on land and sea, quite literally around the world. But rather than summarize it for you, let's hear it from the man himself. Captain Pete, welcome to the Ecoflix podcast.
David, it's good to be here, mate. How you doing?
I'm doing great, thank you. So one of your more impactful quotes has stuck with me quite firmly. Said, "You haven't lived until you found a cause worth dying for." How would you describe your cause?
My cause now is saving wildlife, and it has evolved a little bit over the years, but I work on saving wildlife, and I've got a team of people and I use them to the best of my ability to try and save wildlife in different parts of the globe. And I gave that quote. It was during a TED talk many years ago when I just about lost my life in Brazil. I got knifed by some guys when I was following the illegal pet trade. And it kind of came home for me that there's something like 400 rangers a year die, park rangers protecting wildlife, and there are risks involved. If you're passionate about saving wildlife, there are some risks, and especially in the Amazon and parts of Africa and stuff. And so I gave that talk. You haven't lived until you found something worth dying for. And I'm not saying I want to die, but when I look at the people who lead the richest lives, they do have something they stand for, and it's something I try and live by now.
Yeah, I totally understand, although most people don't put it in such stark terms, and you put yourself into a lot of danger periodically, so you're certainly walking the walk. Another one of your observations I thought was quite an eye-opener, and for people who've never heard this statistic before, and I assume part of your motivation came from the realization that people and their domestic animals make up 97% of the biomass on Earth, while wildlife makes up only 3%.
Yeah, in fact, I had one of my crew members gave me that stat. So I thought, let's do some digging. I had a group of volunteers all went and did research. What's the total biomass of birds around the world, biomass of mammals, amphibians, reptiles, added it all up, and then compared it with the dogs, cats, cows, sheep, goats. There's like 12 or 13 of the domesticated animals, and the numbers did come out. 3% is the wildlife, and 97. And in fact, it's reversed. If you go back to the year about 0 AD, when then mankind was limited in the areas we're at, it's basically the reverse. Then it was 97%, 96% wildlife, and 3% man. And the numbers are, when you look at how they're changing in recent times, we are heading for dark times in terms of wildlife, and it's one of the reasons I dedicate my life to trying to save wildlife in my own kind of way.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it in just limited terms, cows on the Earth, in the natural space, cows would have such a tiny percentage of biomass, but because of the mass production of the cow industry for beef all over the world, and not only does the biomass of cows go way up on the domestic side, but the land that's dedicated to farming the crops that has to feed them eliminates wildlife. So
yeah,
all those things combined are just a terrible trend.
Yeah, it's one of the things, David, like these days I've got a conservation chip, and I encourage my crew to cut down or to eliminate their meat and dairy, but it's a hard message to sell. You find young people increasingly are vegetarian and vegan, and there's no doubt that the planet pays a heavy price for us, and those people who are heavy meat eaters, heavy dairy consumption, it's a heavier price this planet pays. But it's not an easy message. And in my gig, for example, I've got park rangers on my ship every week. There's park rangers coming on board. They're all meat eaters, and so there's that. We cater to them. We provide meat, and some of my crew are meat eaters, and some of them not. I'm not going to attack them for it. But if we look at the future, I think lower consumption of meat and dairy are both things that the world needs to pursue.
That's for sure. And I think it's important for people to come to these realizations in their own way and in their own time. And all of us have had our journey to, for lack of a better word, enlightenment. And one of the things that you've said right there, just about the biomass comparisons, is a start. And many of the other issues, the health components of it, people who eat meat don't live as long. There's a lot of reasons.
Yeah.
But again, people have to figure it out in their own way.
Yeah. The other thing too, I think, David, there's some very powerful forces aligned against you. Like you look at the animal agriculture in the US, for example. It's a very powerful interest group, lobby group. And so you're taking on very strong forces that will propagate a certain message. You're seeing a similar thing now with battery electric vehicles. A similar thing happened with us with biodiesel. Biodiesel suddenly got tainted when the oil industry suddenly saw it as a threat. There was a very powerful campaign against biodiesel and complaining about there were some problems with biodiesel, and it was never a silver bullet for transport energy. But they basically ridiculed it, and suddenly everyone's saying, oh, biofuels are bad. They're not bad. There's examples of them that are poor. And, one of them is the cutting down of palm oil cutting down of virgin forest and then planting palm oil in its place. And so these lobby groups, they lobbied against biodiesel. You didn't see them lobbying against shampoo and conditioners and cosmetics they consumed way more than biodiesel ever did in terms of palm oil. Everyone was okay with that, but suddenly biodiesel in cars is bad because you're consuming palm oil. And not to say that, palm oil was the right choice, but, you take on powerful forces. And in conservation, there's this gradual journey we're on where, gradually corporates are starting to realize that climate change is real, and there's things that we can do in our everyday lives to try and reduce that impact. But it's a slow journey, eh?
Yeah, and it's important to evolve when and as you learn more. I mean, very few people just wake up in the morning and the bulb goes on and they say, oh, I'm going to change everything I've ever learned to do. You need to slowly realize, for reasons that may be totally personal, that that's what you want to do. And it helps to be educated. It helps to have role models to follow. It helps to read and learn the facts, but it doesn't help to lecture people. They just and they get more intense.
I had a very good CEO of mine when I first started this current project, and he had a saying, and he said he likens your opinion on something to being a bead on a rod, and it can be at 0 or 100% or anything in between. And he said you never want to be at 0 or 100, because then you become independent of any evidence that can push you otherwise. And he said you want to be at 90%. So given sufficient evidence to the contrary, you are prepared to change your mind. And it's a very valuable lesson for me about making sure, look, it may turn out that climate change is not real. I'm prepared to change my mind. If there's enough scientists come in and start saying, actually, we were wrong, I'm prepared to change my mind. I think it's unlikely, but once we get in a position where we're incapable of changing our mind, that's a dangerous place to be. And I would suggest that there's many demographics around the world now that they're in that fixed position where, regardless of what evidence is presented, they're never going to change their mind. And I don't think that's a healthy way to be.
Definitely not. And it's, of course, one of the main factors that controls politics around the world. It's very hard to shake people of a position they've taken in support of a position or a candidate or whatever. And it's not helping. I mean, we really need to pull together as a group all the time, and people need to work together, not as individuals.
Yeah, I see it in the US. And the US is especially prominent in this, where it's like you've picked your team, and you're pro-gun or anti-gun, you're anti-abortion or pro-abortion, pro-vaccine, anti-vaccine, pro-mask, you name 20 different things where you're on this team or you're on this team, and there's not a lot of middle ground, and the debate has become quite different. I noticed it especially over the vaccines, where it was you're better off avoiding the conversation because people had chosen their camp and they weren't prepared to go have any dialogue otherwise. And that's I think it's sad when we lose that middle ground, and we people are unable to go switch and from one side to the other. In fact, I was at the start of Corona, I thought it was a joke, and I just laughed it off. And I said, "Yeah, I don't need to worry about it. I'm fit and healthy." Then I got bitten by a snake while we were doing a patrol up in a national park here with the rangers. I got bitten by a terciopelo, which is the second most deadly snake in the world. And I ended up in this hospital in the middle of the Corona circus when there was patients coming in all through the day and all through the night. And suddenly, I'm on death's door. And if I got Corona, would have probably been enough to tip me over the edge. And suddenly, so that kind of made me, it took a snake bite and a near-death experience for me to change my mind when I'm one of the vulnerable people. And I think that, when I look at great leaders we have in the world, generally they're prepared to change their mind given sufficient evidence. But the mind is not show. You've got to come up with scientific data or rational reasons why there's a better answer. There was that famous quote. I think it was that guy Neil deGrasse. His full name escapes me. That's a super clever guy. But he said, "There's one thing that beats science, and that's better science." And it's a great quote.
Yeah, he's a astrophysicist. He knows a little bit. He's a very smart guy. But it's true. People are often stuck in their ways and very reticent to listen to opposing views. And it's certainly not what makes humans exceptional on the planet. I would say it's one of our serious weaknesses. And I don't think a lot of people even stop to think about how easily we can be drawn into a camp, especially in things like what we eat and how long we live and animals, how they should be treated. A lot of people have been growing up with one approach, and the idea of convincing them that they have to do something completely different is not easy. And so they reject it until they really know a lot more. And that's why it takes time. And I think people leading by example rather than by lecturing are the best ways. And that's frankly one of the reasons for this podcast, because there are a lot of people out there like you who are really, I won't say put their money where their mouth is. In your case, you're putting your body where your mouth is. You're doing a lot to try and change the world for the better. And when people see and hear why you do things and what you're doing, I think it has a great impact. And so maybe you can walk us through some of the specifics of what you've been doing over the years to try and help, what kinds of efforts to stop poaching and fishing and all different kinds of things. Because I don't think most people have a clue how much you've done and all the various places you've done it.
Yeah, well, you mentioned at the start, there was the very early days, I built this powerboat called Earthrace, and we set a record to circle the globe running this boat on 100% biodiesel from waste cooking oils. And that kind of opened my eyes up to sort of my ability to make things happen and my ability to lead teams and to try and do more with my life than, the normal thing in New Zealand is you get married, you have a couple of kids, and you live happily ever after. And I sort of felt like I needed to do more. So I set the record in that boat. And then there was that period of what am I going to do now? And I actually, for a period, I contemplated going back to 9 to 5. I don't want to maybe go sell washing machines or something, but it was very hard to go back. And it's one of the great things when, and you're in the situation now, when you get to work on stuff you truly believe in, it's very hard to step away from that. And I liken it to the Matrix with the red pill and the blue pill. It can be a one-way journey, or to go back is very challenging. And so after my time in Earthrace, there was that opportunity to work with Sea Shepherd in Antarctica. And it was 2010 season. It became the pivotal year in the anti-whaling movement. And while I was in prison in Japan, the Australian government finally announced court action against Japan under the International Court of Justice, the highest court in the world. A couple of years later, Japan got taken to court by New Zealand, Australia. Japan lost, and a couple of years later, there was no more whaling in Antarctica. So and the fact that my boat was run over, I don't want to go into too many detail, but boat got run over, and I spent 5 months in a max security prison, became the tipping point that made the government take action. And the government taking action was what led to the end of whaling in Antarctica. So if I was to look at my life in the last 20 years, that is the greatest achievement, that I was one of the key players of making that happen. Not just me, there was, Sea Shepherd and WWF and Greenpeace and various organizations lobbied and organized protests and things. Then after that, it's like this red pill, blue pill, fresh start. I finished up with Sea Shepherd, and my relationship with Paul Watson became a little bit difficult. I wanted to carry on in conservation, but there's always that problem of how do you go funding your work. And one of the ideas I had was to do a television show and fund my conservation programs through selling TV episodes. We came to Costa Rica. Oh, we went to Africa actually. We filmed. We were the first group to film the seal clubbing in Namibia. And the hard part, it's in a De Beers diamond mine. So we had to break into a De Beers diamond mine. And these are very well protected facilities. And you get caught in diamond mines, you get shot, or you certainly get a lengthy term in prison. So it wasn't like a walk in the park. And, it was I'd honestly say I was shitting my pants every day we were inside that mine. And amazingly, on the last day, we were out of food, nearly out of water, and the seal clubbers came right in front of us, and we were hidden in ghillie suits, and we managed to film the seal clubbing, which remains one of the most brutal things I've ever witnessed. And we managed to escape, got the footage out, and made the first episode of television. And then I tried getting networks to buy the show, but they were very reluctant. I remember I had a meeting with Discovery, and the executive said to me, Pete, what happens if a cameraman gets shot on one of your crazy missions? I was like, mate, great telly. And it wasn't the answer they were looking for. So it basically became, I couldn't get a network to take the show on as a pre-commission. But I tried raising money. I had a court case where I managed to win back $500,000 that was owed to me. And then I had a guy at won lotto. I talked him into investing $500,000 in the show. Came to Costa Rica, filmed 7 more episodes, and then went to Cannes. There's a thing there called MIP, which is a buyer sellers market for TV shows. And I sold the show. At this stage, we didn't have it edited. We just had it in the can. And so that show got bought by Pivot in the US, and then it aired in something like 90 countries over the sort of following 3 or 4 years. And 2 years later, we went and filmed a second season in mostly in Asia. And so what I did with the team in those days, I had 6 or 7 former military guys. I had some Navy SEALs and SAS and Marine Recon, like hardcore former military guys. And I paid them $250 a day, and I said, look, come on this. And a lot of those guys, when they leave their units, they are looking for meaningful things to do. And they've got some of them highly, highly skilled. So I put those guys to work, and we did, some of our stuff. I called it dodgy ops. Some of them we started to partner with government agencies. We did some work with the Philippines Coast Guard. I've done work with the Navy SEAL unit there. Done work with authorities in Guinea, also in Venezuela back in those days. But a lot of the missions were like, we're just doing our thing, like that seal clubbing one. Like, it was highly illegal for us to break into a diamond mine. There was a growing body of concern about cetacean captivity, so whales and dolphin that get taken from the wild. We broke into a resort in Indonesia. We stole their dolphin, took it 100 k's offshore, and rehabilitated in this little lagoon and let it back into the wild. And at the time, it was illegal for these places to have the dolphin, but the police just turned a blind eye. So technically, it was also illegal for us to go stealing the dolphin, but they had it kind of illegally, sort of thing. So often I would sort of, I was prepared in those days to do things that technically might have been illegal, but that I thought were morally right or morally justified. And that mission, when you talk to my guys, the dolphin mission and the seal clubbing mission are probably the two that really stand out for them, where we delivered in what were very, very difficult circumstance. We closed down 2 wildlife smuggling rings in Palawan and in Philippines, in Cocos Island. We closed down, in the end, probably 8 different illegal logging operations. A lot of illegal fishing. So in those days, I was sort of spending 2/3 of my time was based on illegal fishing. And then eventually the show kind of ran its course. Like, you can only tell that story of boarding an illegal fishing boat so many times. And there was also a slight unease about the demonization of local people. Like, the episodes that rated really well were the ones where there's a definite bad guy. But I was starting to come to this realization that life's often not like that. And, if I look at it today, like, I've caught probably over 200 people poaching wildlife illegally. and I've caught maybe 600 or 700 people fishing illegally over the last number of years. They're nice people, and that's the hard part. And so with the television show, our network in the US, they closed down, so that took away a chunk of money. And then I was thinking, do I really want to keep doing this? The episodes that rate, you're demonizing local people, and they're not nasty people. And there's a great saying that a former CEO of mine once told me, and he said, it's Chinese, and it's to know all is to forgive all. And literally, it doesn't make much sense. But what it's trying to say is, if I know the full history of David, I will understand why you are a particular way, and I will understand your flaws. And when I catch someone that's fishing illegally, if I really was in that guy's shoes, I'd probably be tempted to do the same thing. So it's resulted in me, I flagged away the television. I didn't want to go doing that anymore. And I've become, I guess, a lot softer in my approach with the people fishing illegally. And, these days, a lot of our work in Costa Rica, the fishermen have become genuine partners in this. And Gulf of Dulce is a great example. So we started patrolling here 3 years ago. And on the first night, we caught 26 boats fishing illegally. And not one of them was arrested. And in the end, and we partner here with the park rangers, and they make the decisions in terms of who gets arrested or whatever. Not one was arrested. I was a bit upset at the time, and the park rangers sort of said, Pete, or Pedro, they call me, it's not the way we do things here. The next patrol we did, we caught 15. Next patrol was 7. And on the 7, there was one guy, it was the 3rd time we'd caught him in a row. He got prosecuted. And the prosecution is complex here, like 2 days of paperwork and stuff to make a prosecution happen. Now in Gulf of Dulce, there's virtually zero fishing illegally. Like the last 2 patrols we've done here, and one was just recently, no one fishing illegally. The last people we've caught here, both times, it's other fishermen have told us, hey, there's someone fishing illegally up in the mangroves, up by the Koto River was the last one. And so we went up there and caught these guys. So in many ways, the fishermen have become our allies. You talked earlier about a long game, and that's what we've been playing here. And it's been much more rewarding for me in terms of I'm a part of the community here. I help address illegal fishing. Synac, the park ranger team, they don't have money for boats. They don't have money for fuel. Their funding has been chopped, in part because of Corona and healthcare and education. It's a hard ask getting money from the government. So we've got a genuine role to play here in terms of stopping illegal fishing, and we work on we do anti-poaching in the jungle, and we do illegal mining operations sometimes, trying to catch those guys as well. But we're a part of the community here, and we're not beating people up, we're not demonizing them, we're engaging with them. I normally, when we go out, we'll take out a few cans of Red Bull, and we might buy a fish off one of the fishermen, and we engage with them and talk to them, and how's the fishing been? And most of them, they've just come to accept us. We're part of the furniture here now, and they open up, and occasionally we'll get a bit of intel on someone that's doing something naughty. And it's been this journey in conservation. It's very easy for us to think that other people are always the problem. And I see it if you take the average. I'm a Kiwi, right? The average footprint of a New Zealand is massive. Our consumption of oil per capita per day is something like 6 liters or 1.5 gallons. Like we're part of the problem, and I think it's easy to think, oh, the poachers in Africa are the bad guys. I'm not saying they're good guys, but there's reasons why they do that, and it's not to say it shouldn't be addressed in some way, but generally they're not evil people. They're people out there feeding their families, and part of the long game, I think, is in Costa Rica as an example, there's a strong transition to tourism. The poachers and the miners tend to be older guys, like young people. They value the environment here, and they realize that tourism is worth a lot more here than it is hunting an animal. Live animals and tourism are worth way more, but it's a long game, eh?
So tell me a little bit about your work on shark finning. This is something that most people that don't know much about the area are just afraid of sharks, and they don't see any problem with killing sharks or how they kill the sharks, because they think somehow that's better for people that are in the ocean. And yet they serve such an important function, and the cruelty involved in this finning industry is really unbelievable. So can you talk a little bit about it for people who don't know what is involved and what you've done in that area?
So look, shark finning it polarizes people to some degree. Like some people are, good sharks are dead shark kind of thing, but they are key to healthy environments. So sharks are one of the apex predators in the ocean. They will generally target sick fish, weak fish, fish that are slow in the other. So in terms of maintaining genetic and DNA strength within a given population, sharks have a role to play in that and being that and providing that role as an apex predator. And your chances of dying a shark is virtually zero. Like per year, I think now it averages 10 people per year die of shark attacks. To put that in perspective, there's millions die a year of malaria from mosquito, but we don't go around hating on the mosquito. Something like 50,000 people a year die from snake bites. We don't go around well, we probably to some degree do. I nearly lost my life to a snake a few years ago. I don't hate them. They're part of a healthy ecosystem. And if you're going to, if you really want to go swimming, let's say on the Gold Coast in Australia, they do regularly get sharks there in some quite big numbers. But you're in their environment. Look, if you're one of the 10 unlucky people that got bitten and killed by a shark that year, that's what comes from being in their turf. And I've seen it not just in sharks, that human animal conflict is very prevalent now. And we like animals that stick to our rules. Example would be the wolves in Yellowstone. They reintroduced wolves there quite successfully. And Yellowstone is a much healthier national park with the reintroduction of wolves. The wolves don't know where that boundary is. And so they, err onto a farmer's property. Next thing you have a go at some cattle, which is a soft shell tucker, probably in the wolf world. And I've seen it in India with tigers. I've seen it in Sembilang. Anywhere we get these animals that are threatening to us, our natural reaction is to want to kill the animals, and it's wrong. Like we're increasingly encroaching into their turf. You see it in London now with foxes. There was foxes is one of the success stories in UK. They have so little wildlife there. They've got badgers that they're busy killing now because they believe they're a threat in terms of TB. So they're killing all the badgers. They hate the fact that the foxes living in London, eating mice and rats mostly, but there was this talk of them coming in and eating babies, for goodness sake. Look, if you're foolish enough to leave a baby out the back, by some small miracle, some fox did come and have a go at it. Good luck to the fox. I'd suggest, like, you're leaving your baby outside for a fox to come and have a go at night. They're not out there in the day. And so with the shark finning, so one side of it is like it's wrong to go demonizing shark. Shark, however, is a very important food in a lot of places. So, for example, in Trinidad and Tobago, so we did some work there getting turtles protected. At the time, it was legal to buy and sell turtle meat. We ran a campaign there. We bought a turtle off the side of the road, put a tracker on it, set it free, and we ran a program in all the schools there. And there was a competition to see who could see how many kilometers this turtle would swim over the following 3 months. And we ran it amongst the schools. And eventually the government there changed the law and they made it legal to go dealing and to buy and sell and catch turtles was illegal. And they started removing the lights on beachfronts for the nesting turtles, things like that. And anyway, they have a product there called, I think it's Shake and Bake or Shark and Bake. Maybe Shark and Bake. Anyway, it's a shark product. And so I went in there and I was like, yeah, you can't go eating the sharks, blah, 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 blah. And they were like, like it's dogfish. And at the time, I didn't realize that New Zealand was involved in the shark trade. Like we would buy dogfish and they were part of our fish and chips. It was the standard kind of thing. And if you look at a lot of countries around the world, shark finning is illegal, where you cut off the fins and that's all you take. And that gets sent to China. It's used in a thing called shark fin soup. And the fin is not that tasty, apparently. It's more of a texture food, I think. That is clearly wrong. For you to take 5% of the body mass of this animal and then discard the rest, clearly wrong. But shark remains, and when I say shark, smaller sharks like dogfish, they remain a very important part of a lot of communities around the world. And so if it's illegal for them to take shark, I'm opposed to it. And for example, great whites, tiger sharks, bull sharks, all of those sharks are rightfully protected. But the smaller sharks in a number of countries are not. But there's still these guys go and do the shark finning. We caught some out at Cocos Island. We caught a group in Africa, but it was perfectly legal in those days. This was in Guinea. It was like 7 or 8 boats all came in at the same time, all their boats full of shark fin. So of course I went down there thinking it was illegal, and I'd had a conversation with the Minister of Environment there who'd said it's illegal to take shark fin. It turned out it wasn't actually illegal, and so then there was a very awkward discussion over the following week where they had to clarify, is it illegal or not? And it turned out that the legislation had been written, but it still hadn't been voted on in the parliament. So technically it was quite legal. So I guess, David, the answer that shark finning is clearly wrong, but that eating of sharks is a very complex issue around the world. And a number of countries, I'll tell you, there's a story actually in Costa Rica here where I am now. So many years ago, they changed the law to say shark finning was illegal, but you're allowed to bring the sharks in if you bought the complete shark in, and they termed it fins that naturally attached. So what the fishermen started doing was they would bring in the tail and the fins and the backbone. So it was still all a single animal, but they discarded all the meat, because what they're worried about, the meat gives off ammonia, so that detracts from the rest. If you put them in a normal fish hole, you've got to keep the shark separate. So they would have a separate container, but they could fill the boat up with these things because they're not taking the meat. It was just, and so that got around the law. So then the government changed the law again and changed the law again. And so there's been this cat and mouse game where the fishermen always seem to manage to go getting around the law. These days here on the smaller sharks, I think it remains legal, but the whole carcass has got to be brought in. So if you're bringing it in, and it's getting used to, and you're not allowed to discard the flesh. That was another one. So what they started doing, they bring the shark in, but then the fin would get taken at the fish processing plant, which in fact is just over here. The fins would get taken off, and then the carcass was chucked out. And then they just had a big problem with crocodiles coming in and feasting on all the shark carcasses. So shark finning is a complex issue, my friend.
It's very complicated, and it's also unbelievably brutal. I mean, they are literally chopping these animals up while they're alive. They don't go to the trouble of euthanizing them and then carving them. They just carve them.
Yeah, we had one I saw out at Cocos Island, and they gaffed the shark, so it's like a big hook that they put in the carcass. They pull it up inside the boat, and then it just took the guy 20 seconds, cuts the fins off, cuts the tail, tucked it back over, still alive. Yeah. Like there's, I talk about, fishermen and decent people or whatever. This is not decent. And, I think some of these people, they get normalized and they start to think that behavior is okay. For someone who, I love animals and love wildlife and stuff, and pretty heartbreaking to go witnessing things like that.
Yeah, it's just cruel. And it's hard for people who don't, it's really kind of fundamental about humans. If you don't speak our language and you can't say, I'm in agony, what you're doing to me is absolutely, excruciating. They ignore it. They just assume, well, the fish can't talk, he's not suffering.
Yeah. Again, right, that raises a really interesting point where society gradually evolves and we change what we deem as acceptable. There's a period if you go back a couple of 100 years, they were burning witches at the stake in UK. That was what they did. And if you look at the treatment of animals, when I'm 58 now, when I was at school in the 70s, the environment wasn't even a subject you could study. And the treatment of animals, no one cares about the animal. And so you've started to see that transition. And, I mentioned before about that dolphin that we rescued from captivity. Suddenly, it's a good thing. Mankind is starting to question these things. Is it right what we're doing? Is it right to be captive? There was a while ago they were capturing turtles and putting them in plastic keychains, live turtles inside a keychain, for goodness sake. What's that about? And so much of the world looks at that and says, oh, that's horrible. Whereas 30 or 40 years ago, that might have deemed quite acceptable. I'll give you another example, which plenty of people might disagree with. Today, we spay and neuter dogs. Would we be prepared to do that to a human being? Now, I'm not saying everyone go out and not spay and neuter the dogs, because then probably you've got a dog population out of control. But there's lots of things like that currently we do that in the future, I think society will question and say, were they right to do that? And I think it's the sign of a good society that we are prepared to go questioning things, and we're prepared to go changing our viewpoint, which is, we mentioned that before, changing our viewpoint as, maybe as we get wiser, or we gradually get more empathy for the animals that, we are, imprisoning or taking captive or getting out of the wild or.
Well, but what you're talking about with spay and neuter is an interesting example, because people, for lack of the accurate term, people do spay and neuter themselves. They make the decision to terminate their ability to, produce offspring. And the only difference between that and spay and neuter is you're doing it to yourself, not to somebody else.
Yeah, but here's just a point on that. The spaying, I think a female dog remains largely the same when you spay her, but when you neuter a dog, you cut out his balls, and it is a different dog. Like I don't know anyone who's neutered themselves. I know, plenty
in that way, no. In that way, no.
like we do go get in the tuck where, it's no longer possible to father children.
Right.
But you are the same person. You've still got plenty of testosterone and you lead a natural life. And so that's kind of the point I'm getting at. The spaying, I don't think, changes a female dog so much in terms of, she can't have puppies, but it's still largely the same dog. But neutering a male dog, like we've got, for example, we have a dog called Upper on our ship, and we use them to track people illegally in the jungle. Normally it's gold miners or people who are poaching wildlife. Like I couldn't send him off to the vet and have that done. Like I know he would be a different dog. The downside of that is, if there's any bitches in heat when we're wandering through town, he's all over that trying to get to get off the leash, as any male dog would be. But he'd join the queue, like you see. In fact, the other day I was in town here, and there was, here they got quite a few street dogs. There was this little street dog, obviously in season, and there was 5 dogs all queued up, all hoping that they could all have a turn. Anyway, sorry, we got a bit sidetracked there, David, didn't we?
A little bit, but. I think the evolution of your work is quite interesting, because you've done so many different things. And in 2020, you kind of settled down a little bit and signed a contract with the government of Costa Rica, which is fascinating. Can you talk a little bit about your contract there, the first contract, because it's been renewed, and then how it's been expanded?
Sure. So I first came here in 2013, and we did 3 or 4 of those episodes that I mentioned. We partnered with SINAC, the park rangers, and then in 2019, I signed a partnership with Sheeble, which is a military drone manufacturer, and then I had another guy who sponsored me a ship. So he basically paid for me to buy this 1944 former U.S. Navy ship. We were coming down the coastline in 2019. And then we got as far as Costa Rica. So we were doing fishery patrols. We did some in Mexico, did some scientific research, started doing similar things in Costa Rica, and then Corona hit. And I remember I had on the ship the Minister of Environment, Minister Rodriguez was his name. And he said, Pete, this Corona might be here to stay for a while. You sure you want to go leaving for Panama? And I thought about it, and he came and he said, look, I've got 3 or 4 projects that are ideal for you. Help us out and then make up your mind. So we did some big patrols in Corcovado National Park targeting illegal miners. And I love that jungle. Like, it's one of the greatest jungles on Earth. It has 3% of the world's biodiversity in one jungle. It's one of the few places still with very healthy populations of jaguar. It's got everything in there. Anyway, we did some work there, and so the minister called me up. He said, Pete, have you thought any more about that agreement? And by then, I couldn't go moving my boat. The only place I could take it was back to the States, which I didn't really want to do. And there's more work from here. So I signed a 3-year agreement with the minister. And so that basically meant we rode out that whole Corona circus in Costa Rica. And when you're on a ship, it didn't really bother us. We could still go into town and do our shopping. You couldn't go to the restaurants, but you could still buy a restaurant meal and take it back to the boat. But what happened, gradually my crew left. I couldn't bring back a new crew. And so towards the end of it, the last, I think, 4 months, there was just myself and my girlfriend at the time living on the ship. And then once it started opening up again, then we were back into it. And what I've sort of realized, I've added a lot of value since I've been here. And I worry that I go leaving and a lot of that value gets undone. Like at the moment, we just need to do the odd patrol Gulf of Dulce, Cabo Blanco, Murcielago in the north. We don't have to do patrols every day. We just do the occasional patrol, and that is enough to keep the illegal fishing largely at bay. There's still a little bit happens, and we're continuing to work on those. And so I've lived the dream, mate. In the last 3 years, I've been very fortunate. We've caught a lot of people fishing illegally. We've seen a big reduction in illegal fishing, which is the most satisfying part of it. Caught a few people poaching. We caught some illegal miners. We lived in one of the greatest countries on earth. Like I don't want to go moving my phone because it's settled there, but I've got a national park a few kilometers this way, and then I've got a nature reserve a few kilometers this way. I wake up every morning, there's howler monkeys growling at me in the distance, sort of thing. And the Costa Rican government has been amazing to work with. Like they just signed a new 5-year extension to our agreement here. They give me ranges when I want them. They accept the advice that I give them, not always, but for the most part. Like the government departments here are not really boat people, and so I've got a role to play in terms of advising them on boats and patrols and surveillance and training their rangers on how to do coastal surveillance and offshore surveillance. There's a lot of technology that's starting to come in through satellite. So there's the Earthrace program, which is developed by Paul Allen's foundation, Vulcan. That's been a game changer for us. And they can access single aperture radar. So that the whole game of fishery patrols especially is changing. There's all this technology that you can bring in. The VEERS satellite network it was originally put up by NOAA for weather forecasting. We use that to detect boats. Earthrace, they go paying for the single aperture radar, and there's various other tools. There's global fishing bots. There's so many tools at your disposal. So part of our role here is to use those tools as best we can, and then to go training the local rangers too, so that they're not so dependent on us. And the recent patrols, I think we've got the scheduled February, March, and April. We're out to Cocos Island doing patrols out there. And we use the Global Fishing Watch website to predict where the boats are likely to be. Then we use near real-time satellite data to get a fix on where was a boat maybe 6 hours ago. Then we fly our Sheeble drone. We can fly that 200 kilometers from the ship with live video back to the boat. And so if there's illegal boats out there, we do catch them. And, especially the foreign boats are a very strong target for us here. The locals... the local boats that are fishing illegally, they might get a slap on the wrist, or occasionally, they might get arrested. But foreign boats are the number one target for us. If we find foreign boats here, that certainly helps ingratiate us to the local communities, because the locals here, they hate the fact that these foreign boats coming in. Recently, there's been a couple of Venezuelan purse seiners. I don't know if you know anything about types of fishing boat, but purse seiners, they don't employ a lot of people, but they take a lot of fish. A typical purse seiner we would see here might take 25 to 50 ton in a day.
Is that long
That's
lining?
A lot of fish. No, it's not long lining. So it's called purse seining. So in fact, I could just about show you one of the boats. At the risk of losing you here, mate, I'm going to take you and show you one, because there's one of them is just outside here. Well, you're going to be able to see.
There we go.
So there's two boats over there. There's the one on the left is a work boat. That is a purse seiner, and you won't be able to see it very well, but it's got a little boat on the back, and it's got a big pulley on top. And they get a net, and losing track here. So what they do is they have a net, and they put it all the way around a school of fish. They have a helicopter on top that they use to spot the dolphin. They set them around the dolphin, and tuna invariably are underneath the dolphin. They catch so much fish. If you look at a longliner, so there's out this side of my boat, there's probably 20 or 30 longliners out there. They employ 4 or 5 people, and they catch a moderate amount of fish, but not a huge amount. And those are, they're a valuable part of the economy here. But those purse seiners, they don't employ many people. They average over a ton per employee per day. And in many ways, it's kind of rape of the ocean. And so anyway, there's no purse seiners. Costa Rica has no purse seiners of their own. There's a couple that come in under quota, but they're only allowed to go a long way offshore. So they keep the inshore fishery, and the coastal fishery is all for local fishermen. But sometimes those boats go sneaking in. So they're a big target for us here.
Yeah. And you showed us a little bit of the boat. This is the former Navy ship that you bring to the equation, as you mentioned, with the drones and a variety of equipment. Talk a little bit about that.
So it was built in 1944. It was called the Bagaduce when it was a naval vessel. Did 25 years with the Navy. After World War II, so the main job it did in World War II, it was classed as an auxiliary tug, and it would tow around destroyers and cruisers and combat ships. It would tow them around when they got stricken. And there was a big typhoon near the Philippines that wiped out a big chunk of the US naval Pacific fleet. And it spent, I believe, 6 months towing these stricken boats backwards and forwards, and you're rescuing them and then tying them to areas that they could be refitted and repaired and sort of thing. So 25 years Navy ship, then 25 years as a Coast Guard boat doing fisheries and keeping an eye on the Russians between Alaska and a lot of time in Washington State, Oregon State, a little bit in California. Then a guy bought it and he used it as a tourist boat in Alaska. And it was sort of like a fishing tourism boat. He would leave it at anchor mostly, and people would fly in and I think and come in and go fishing for a week in Alaska, sort of thing. And then another guy bought it, but he wasn't really using it. And Sheeble had said they would sponsor me the drone. I needed to have a 30-foot by 30-foot flight deck to be able to fly that and land it effectively. Not many boats sort of fit that, except for really big boats. But I was very lucky. This boat is very wide, and so I could just fit in the flight deck. In fact, what I should do.
And the drone is very big. It's like a little airplane.
Let me show you the drone, mate. It's just sitting out here. So this is here. It's got a whole lot of caution tape around it, but it's 450 pounds.
Yeah.
It's it's about 10 meters long. This is the flight deck here so there's a cover on there, but that's got a landing grid and the drone locks into that. And so we've got plenty of space here to take off and land. Well, I got you. I might as well show you the other bits here. So this is a Willard rib, which is a former Navy SEAL rib. So we managed to get that. So we use that for coastal patrols and offshore for boarding boats. Down here's the little Zodiac. So we use that for estuarine work and things like that. I don't know if you saw, my tracking dog up. I was just in the view there briefly. I got one of my crew. She's one of the things with tracking dogs. They have 30% of their brain is tied up to the sense of smell. Humans is like 2%, but that it takes training and repetition and things to keep that nose like really, really in tune. And so what we do almost every day, for half an hour to 45 minutes, we hide stuff around the boat. So we'll hide random objects, or it might be his ball. He loves the ball. We've got a sidearm that smells of cordite and gunpowder and sort of thing. So one of the things we use them in the jungle for is to locate guns. So if you come across a poacher, for example, as you get close to them, if they realize they're about to be busted, they will throw their gun away. Or if they have a camp, they never keep their gun in the camp. They hide it 20, 30, 50 meters away. So we use them to try and locate guns in the jungle. So a sense of smell is very important. So a big part of his day is we hide stuff, and he loves it. Like, he thinks his job is to find stuff. And the reward he gets is, if it's the ball or one of his playthings, he gets to chew that for a bit. He's not a very food-focused dog. Like, the way to train him is the ball or things that like, or what's it called? We've got a sling that you put on your arm, a bite sleeve. That is number one for him, because he gets to bite you and he gets to chew you. And another key part of the training that I'll mention very briefly is the out command. So when he bites someone, you need to have sufficient control of him that he will release that person. And so when he has the ball, he might get to play with it for a minute or two, but then it's out, and he's got to release it, and he gets in trouble if he doesn't release it, sort of thing. So it's been a great journey having a tracking dog on the boat.
Yeah,
it was sponsored by an NGO in Britain called Animals Saving Animals, and they'd supplied something like 30 dogs into anti-poaching operations in Africa. And the guy called me up and he said, I see you guys are doing some work on poaching and that in the jungle in Costa Rica. Would you like a dog? I thought, let me think about it. And initially I was thinking, do I really want a dog on a boat? Like, he sits on, on the back deck or whatever, but he sits in a small area. And the more I thought about it, I thought, he would add value, like in terms of security. He has saved us once. One of the dramas I haven't mentioned, we got boarded by 15 pirates in Buenaventura in Colombia about a year and a half ago. And Upper went absolutely ballistic at them. Gutsy pirates, like, for them to try and board our boat, this is a hard target. We have assault rifles on here, and we had one of our crew doing security. the locals knew that we would do these patrols, and they knew that we had a dog on, and yet still tempted to try and board it. It was 6 boats, 15 guys, and they come sliding down the side. And then, Upper was the one that alerted our crew that there was these guys at 2 o'clock in the morning. They'd fabricated metal hooks up over the side of the boat and clambering up, and took up and nearly biting one of the guys' heads off, and a bunch of rounds through an assault rifle before they backed off. But I think if Upper hadn't been on the boat, it might have been a different story. Certainly, I think one or two of them pirates would have gotten on board before we realized it. And if you're on a ship like this, you need to keep them off your boat. Like when they're not on your ship, we have an advantage. You're on a steel ship, and we have a definite advantage for them to climb up their sides. Their hands are busy, so they can't go shooting you or knifing you or pulling machete because they're busy. But as soon as they step on your boat, it's very different. Don't let them on your boat in the first place.
Good lesson to learn. I probably won't need it, but I hope I don't.
Hopefully not, big guy.
Well, let's end with the story about what you were doing and how you happened to get bitten by this snake.
So that was about 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago now, I think. It was. So we'd started to do some patrols in a national park called Piedras Blancas, and it's about 10 kilometers from where we're anchored at the moment. And the rangers had come to us and said, we want to start doing patrols on the backside of the jungle. And so we talked about maybe we should just do a little recce up there first. So sometimes if we're going to do patrols, we want to just go around the outside initially and see is there evidence of poaching, and can we see where they're going? Are there main tracks that they're using and those kind of things? And because we'd never done any patrols up there, it was kind of new for us and the rangers. So we sort of said, yeah, let's do just an initial recce up there. And it was on Boxing Day, just after Christmas. So we go up there, and often in the jungle, the easiest way to walk is on creek beds. Creek beds that has a steady supply of water coming down, sometimes floods. Those are easier places, but sometimes you might come across some little cliff faces or something that are hard to get over, or it might get too overgrown. Then your next best option is to go on a ridgeline, and generally the ridgelines will always have game trails on them. So generally it's a combination of creek beds, river beds, and then occasionally a ridgeline. We were changing, because there's some cliff faces, we were changing over to a ridgeline. And I was walking along, it was about half a dozen guys behind me. And next thing I just felt this bang in the back of my calf. And it felt like someone had hit me with a baton or a stick. And I sort of turned around, looked down, and here was this terciopelo backing up like this and like ready to strike again. Like, holy shit. And I backed off, and I knew it was a terciopelo. So terciopelo, the English name for it is a fer-de-lance. And it kills more people than any other snake in Central and South America. And on patrols here, I've seen about a dozen on patrols here. And the one snake, the rangers, you give them a wide berth. Like most snakes here, the rangers will flick them out of the way and pick them up and whatever. But the terciopelo, whenever they see one, they'll tie, they have plastic bags in the packs, and we tie a plastic bag on trees in that area so that next time you're doing patrol, there was a terciopelo here, you better be careful. The terciopelo, they're camouflaged. They've got this sort of triangular sort of shape on them, super well camouflaged. And in leaf litter, almost impossible to see at
How big
times.
are
And so anyway, they will grow to about 10 foot, and in terms of diameter, about that big. The one that got me was relatively small, like about that diameter, maybe 4.5, 5 feet long. But what they found over the years, so reptiles are very conscious of energy, and everything they do is a balance of, is this justified, me burning this energy or using these proteins or whatever? When a snake bites someone like me, it's not seeing me as food, it's seeing me as a threat. And the terciopelo is very aggressive. This is my turf, don't come back here, kind of thing. And so they will do that to peccary, to deer, to a number of animals. Occasionally we're walking through the jungle, here's a dead peccary on the side of the track, and it's been bitten by a terciopelo invariably. And so the older snakes, they realize they can just do a dry bite or a very small amount of poison. So generally you get bitten by a big snake and the people survive because it's a dry bite or it's not a huge amount of poison. The medium-sized ones are the ones generally that people die from. And in this case, it was sort of a medium-sized snake. And so when I got bitten, this is at the time, I remember thinking it's going to take us 2.5 or 3 hours to get down down the bottom, and we had worked our way up all these little cliff faces and stuff, and little waterfalls and stuff. And so I'm thinking I'm a dead man. I'm dead man. Like there was a ranger 3 or 4 years ago now. There's a ranger in here. He was dead in 10 minutes
Wow.
after being bitten. They're the deadliest of all the pit vipers. And I remember here's something for you. I actually thought I was a dead man, and I was okay with it. And like I've lived such a privileged life for the last 10, 12 years. And I've done so many cool projects and worked with some amazing teams. And I can honestly say the world is a better place with the work that myself and my team have done. And it's not a bad space to be in when, if today is my last day, I am okay with it, And as you think about your kids and maybe some things you should have done. But on the whole, I remember thinking, if this is my last day on earth, I have lived the dream over the last 10 to 12 years. My life has been worth living, But anyway, I didn't want to die, but then we've got a challenge of getting out there. And initially, my engineer, I jumped up on his shoulders and he started carrying me. Then we fell over, and it was, extremely hard to carry someone going down waterfalls and stuff. And I was burning so much energy. One of the things with snake bites is you need to basically stop moving and stop burning energy and keep your leg still. So if it's a bite in an arm, you would sling the arm and not move it. It's a bite in the leg. You want to be stretch it out, but stretching out wasn't a possibility for us. And carrying out, I was just burning so much energy. My leg was getting bumped. So in the end, we did that for about 10 minutes. I was like, nah, this is like I'm going to be dead in half an hour if we carry on like this. So what I did was I basically crawled on my ass with my sort of left leg pointing forward and my right leg inching on my bum and going down these waterfalls. And then my pulse initially was like 170.
Oh boy.
And then it got slower and slower. And then towards the bottom, it was like 40. And then I just got really tired. I remember I'd crawl 20 meters, 30 meters, then I'd stop for a minute, sort of close my eyes. And so all I wanted to do really is to go to sleep. And then the last 400 meters, I remember seeing the Coast Guard came and they carried me down the final bit to where a boat was waiting. And then from there, it got awfully blurry. Like I remember getting in the boat and being cold and thirsty. And I remember they gave me an apple juice. They gave this apple juice, and then I was sitting there freezing. I said, close the hatch. And, this is 30, 33, 34 degrees Celsius, like 85 degrees, and I'm freezing. And then all of a sudden I went really, really hot. And so my body is starting to shut down. Anyway, then I don't remember the rest of that ride. Then got to hospital. I do remember the transfer into the ambulance. And then the next thing I remember was
did they suck before you went down? Did anybody cut it and try and suck the venom out or anything like that?
No, the recommendation now is not to do that. Now you're adding bacteria off someone's mouth to the wound. So the recommendation is now that you don't do that. And so I got to the hospital. They did an allergy test on the antivenom and then within minutes started administering antivenom on a lot of morphine and antibiotics. And then the next 3 or 4 days, just a blur. I do remember little snippets of waking up, but in this very strong drug-induced sort of, not a coma, but just a stupor. And then day 4, I remember waking up and my leg is like this, like twice the size of my right leg. And the doctor said, like, if it gets any bigger, we're going to have to shift you to another hospital and operate on your leg. And so what happens is it gets so much pressure that the blood flows into the leg, it's not coming back up. And amazingly, the swelling stopped. The following morning they came in and did the measurements around the leg, and like, man, it hasn't gotten any bigger. You might be lucky. Something else amazing too, that the doctors, they put 15 ampules of antivenom in me, and he said that the most they'd ever had on a patient before that survived was 13. So he said 13 was like the sort of unlucky number. Like if they have to go more than 13, normally they lose the patient. My kidney and liver function stopped, and that's a function of your kidneys having to work on. It's got the antibiotics, it's got the antivenom, it's got the venom, and it's got this morphine. So all 4 things are gradually being processed by your kidneys, and in my case, the kidneys basically shut down. So then there's they've got this balancing act, struggling to keep this person alive. Do you continue putting in antivenom? Do you change it from morphine to something else? And they took the antibiotics, so they stopped that at that stage. And then amazingly came out the other side, spent another was total 2 weeks in hospital, and I was a happy man to leave, mate. And on the day I left, my crew came and picked me up. There were some complications. I ended up getting a distended bladder, a complication of the snake bite and various things. And when I left, I had a catheter bag. I couldn't walk. My legs still, still like my calf is like this big. They picked me up in the Zodiac. So they picked me up in the Zodiac. My ship was back around by Piedras Blancas National Park. It was nighttime by the time we got there. Rocio, one of my crew, she had a note up, "Will you marry me?" to Alvaro, her partner, who's driving the Zodiac. And we got on the ship and we had this big party on the boat. Pete survived the snake bite kind of thing. We weren't supposed to be drinking. I think there were a couple of bottles of rum coming out, a bit naughty, but you survive a snake bite, mate, you deserve a bottle.
Yes,
At the end
so.
of that. But it was a very salutary lesson for me. And a lot of people think, they think that a ranger's job is a great job and their lives on the line. In a year, I would spend maybe 2 months in the jungle. These rangers here are doing 8 months a year in the jungle on patrol. And most of them have been bitten by a snake at some stage, not always a fertile lance. I did a patrol with some rangers a year ago. This was over in Corcovado. There was 8 of us on patrol. 5 of us had been bitten by a snake. 4 of us had come under gunfire from illegal miners running away from us. Like the ranger's job is a high risk job now, and the fact that I'm a white boy from New Zealand doesn't give me a free pass to that. Our job is to support the rangers, and at times we are exposed to some of those risks. But I'm not complaining about it. It's the nature of the beast. But they do have World Rangers Day. It's a day that's celebrated around the world now. The date escapes me, but the ranger jobs get taken for granted. It's a really important job in this day and age if we are to go saving these iconic national parks.
Yeah. And it just wasn't your time. You had more to do.
Well, I wasn't my time. My daughter, in fact, my eldest daughter Danielle, she's a great writer. At 15, I've had 2 published books. At 15, her command of English was greater than mine. And she wrote this article, what it's like to have Pete Bethune as my dad. And it got published in some different newspapers and stuff back in New Zealand. And she basically told the story how when I was in prison in Japan, she was embarrassed and that they portrayed me as a common criminal. And she got sort of hassled at school. And one of a sort of right-wing media organization promoted me as a deadbeat. Like I don't have a car, I don't have a house. Like back in New Zealand, I have very little in the way of, virtually zero assets. And they portrayed it not in a very positive light. And my daughter, she said, how she was actually embarrassed at the time. And then over the years, I've, nearly had my life taken several times. Got knifed in Brazil, I got knifed in Nicaragua, been shot at a few times, the snake bite, the pirates in Colombia. And, she said how tough it was every time I left home. She wonders, is this the last time I see Dad? But, the beautiful part, she said, like she knows there's not many people prepared to do what I do and that I play a valuable role. And she loves that I'm free to be able to pursue this. And one of the risks or downsides is that, every now and then she gets a difficult phone call from Larissa, my operations manager, or something. So, oh, yeah, Pete's done it again, or whatever. And my other daughter, Alicia, she says I'm like a cat. I've got 9 lives. That she says I've used 7 of them up. So there's only 2 lives. He says, Dad, stop doing that dodgy stuff. So, but yeah, it's it's a nice position to be in when your daughters are proud of what you do. And I'm very lucky to pursue what I do here, and I every day I jump out of bed and I think, how much can I get done today? And it's a great position to be in.
It is indeed. And you've got now a long-term contract. So you've got a future and money coming in and you're doing important things. So we wish you the best of luck. And I really appreciate you taking the time today to talk to us and tell us about your amazing body of work.
Yeah, well, good. I should point out that the contract with the government here, they don't pay us. So we get our funds out of America. We've got a few big hitters. So it's a $0 contract.
Oh.
And so, but the reason we have that contract, they don't have the money to, they could do it themselves if they could afford to have ships and small boats and big drones and things like that. So But we get our funding from other places. We have volunteers pay to be on the ship. We have a few big hitters that support our work and a couple of foundations and that. Anyway, David, look, I appreciate you having me on, and good luck with this. The Ecoflix is a cool project, and I know it's taken a lot of heart and soul from you, and I wish you good luck with it. And don't be afraid to reach out in the future if you want to do another podcast. I'm still alive another 5 years. Let's come back and see what's been happening in the meantime.
Get caught up. Yeah, find out what you've been up to. Well, I appreciate it very much. Thank you so much.